Hey, my name is Shelly. Welcome to my spring TBR. Up until now, I've been doing monthly TBRs, and as a mood reader who shifts from genre to genre, it doesn't work for me. When I make a TBR during that month, I may be feeling in a certain mood, and I'll load my TBR full of books similar to that, such as like romantasy or whatever. And then halfway through the month, I'll decide that I've had enough and want to read something polar opposite, completely different. As a person who gets burnt out by certain genres very quickly, I just think that it's not a good idea for me to make monthly TBRs. So instead, I'll go back to my old format of going and doing seasonal TBRs. So TBRs that will span 3 months. So the months that I'm going to be talking about are March, April, and May, and it's going to be spring. So I have a large list and a lot of different genres, so I can pick and choose. And obviously, I may not read everything that's on the list, and I may read more that's on the list because I'm always discovering new books that I want to read, which is not a bad problem to have in my mind. So, without further to say, let's get started. I'm going to break this up by genre, and we're going to start with a genre that I haven't read really much of since I was probably in my mid-20s, which was a long time ago, and that is literary fiction. I only actually have one title on this list because I'm trying to slowly dip my toes in to this genre, and I don't want to jump in head first and then get sick of it. The book I want to talk about is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. This was first brought to my attention by Madison Goodyear. She talked about this in one of her videos that she did last year and just raved about it, and since then it's been on my TBR. But I feel like I just wasn't ready to make the dive. But honestly, right now, I even bought the book for my sister for her birthday, which I might take back because I don't think she's read it, and that was like a year ago. It keeps popping up everywhere, and honestly, I really want to get to it. I think it has a very interesting premise. It is set in the Southern Appalachians. This is a story of a boy born to a teenage single mother in a single wide trailer, and I believe it is a retelling of David Copperfield, which I have not read or seen anything of, so I don't know anything about it. Because it is in the Appalachian Mountains, and I'm very curious about that region, it has also just perked my interest. Not to mention the cover is just beautiful. I think I want to pick this book up sooner than later, so you may see it on my recent reads soon. So we're going to skip right to sci-fi because honestly, I have been in such a sci-fi mood lately. So we're going to start right off, dive right into the deep end, and continue on to The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu. I read The Three-Body Problem, I believe, last year and really enjoyed it. I have the audiobook and I did listen to the first chapter and just wasn't in the right headspace to read it at the time. You really do need to be in the right headspace to read this book series. So I feel like now I'm approaching that, and now is the time to pick it up. So I do want to read this soon, and I want to continue on with the series because honestly, this is just a incredible book series. Well, at least The Three-Body Problem was incredible. Incredible difficult, incredible depressing, but also very enlightening. So I'm very excited to continue on with this series. The next book is by an author that is not a stranger to my channel, and that is Adrian Tchaikovsky's Alien Clay. I've had this book since it came out. I've been wanting to read it since it came out. I probably have an unpopular opinion of liking Adrian Tchaikovsky's standalones more than his series. I feel like, this is just my personal thoughts, I feel like he really sticks a landing with shorter stories as opposed to pulling them over time. He has a lot of brilliant ideas, and man, I can't even keep up with all the books that he's writing because I swear he publishes like 2-3 books a year. Incredible. This caught my eye because 1, the name, obviously. 2, the cover. Like, this cover is just, love it. And 3, because I heard it is about an alien planet with ancient civilization. And those are 2 words that will get me to watch or read anything. I am up for it. So I literally have no idea what this book is about besides the fact that it is on an alien planet. Now, I heard from, I can't even remember who, but I heard from a couple people that if you read S.A. Corey's new book, oh God, what's it called? I'm totally blanking on the name. I'll put it here. If you read that book and you were not as impressed as you thought you would be, to read this book and you'll kind of get more out of it than you did for that book. And I did not really love that new S.A. Corey book. I felt like it really it just didn't work for me. I trust Adrian Tchaikovsky and I do love his work, so I think that this will be a hit for me. Next, we're going to move to Sci-Fantasy, and I have two on the list that, kind of bridge the gap between fantasy and sci-fi. The first is The Drawing of Three by Stephen King, and I was not going to continue on with The Dark Tower after reading The Gunslinger. I found The Gunslinger to be a little off-putting. Not for the topics or not for what happened, it's just some of the writing just really didn't sit well with me. But since then, I have read Pet Sematary by Stephen King and absolutely adored it. And honestly, I do want to read more of Stephen King. So since I started this series, I think I need to continue on. I have heard not to judge the series by the first book. So I do want to continue on with The Drawing of Three at some point in the next 3 months, and I will be listening to the audiobook. I'm going to be using this book to decide if I want to continue on with The Dark Tower or not, so fingers crossed that it hits for me. The second that kind of bridges sci-fantasy is The Meme Order by Samantha Shannon. This is the second book in the Bone Season series. I believe that's what it's called. I was not going to continue on with the series after reading the Bone Season. I love Samantha Shannon's ideas. I think that she has crazy great ideas. I just didn't really like the execution. But honestly, I've been thinking about the Bone Season off and on since I read it. And that's a really good indication that it hooked me. A couple people in another person's Discord, not my own, are reading the Bone Season in March. So maybe if they like it, they'll continue in April. So that is the plan. Another one that kind of bridges sci-fantasy is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. This is her newest book, and she's more well known for The Sorga Kaigen, which I absolutely love, one of my favorite books. I know that this story is kind of like a academic story following a very unlikable character, but I've heard so many people that I respect and I have similar tastes to, absolutely love this book. I'm not big on dark academia. I don't even know if it is dark academia, but I'm not big on that. So that's why I didn't pick it up. But honestly, because all these people are kind of saying that it is probably one of their favorite books of the year, I really need to pick it up. I think I have it on KU, but honestly, with all the amazing editions that are coming out, I think I want to grab one of the special editions and read it from there. From sci-fantasy, we're going to move to urban fantasy, and I only have two on the list. And honestly, if you've been following my channel, you probably know which series I'm going to talk about. So the first one is the 8th book in the Kate Daniels series by Ilona Andrews. I'm reading this with my friend on Discord, and we have been having a really great time. I was planning to pick up this book in January, but since I'm listening to the audiobook, I was getting them from my library. And for some reason, my library decided to remove all of everything, all of the audiobooks, so I no longer have a copy to the audiobook. So I'm kind of waiting for this audiobook to come in. If it doesn't come in, I have the book. It won't take me long to read it, and honestly, I should just do it. It's an urban fantasy, but it's in post-apocalyptic urban fantasy, which is very much almost like in a high fantasy kind of world. So you have the high fantasy elements, but you also have the urban fantasy setting, and that's kind of the best way I can explain it. You're following Kate Daniels, and she is... she starts off kind of like a detective almost, but it's not a detective story. Although each book is very episodic, there is a story that's kind of ongoing. And so you have that. But each book, like I said, is very episodic. The one thing I love about this is the characters and the humor. Like, Ilona Andrews is a husband and wife duo team, and they work so well together, and the humor that they bring to these characters is just so good. So I'm very excited to continue on with this. I'm really hoping that my library picks up a copy soon. The second urban fantasy book that I want to get to is the 4th book in the Hollows series by Kim Harrison, and that is A Fistful of Charm. This is another urban fantasy following a witch named Rachel. And in this world, it's kind of it's a little similar to Kate Daniels, where we're in a like post-pandemic or post-epidemic, and there is a big divide between humans and magical creatures. And since Rachel is a witch, she's not human, she's a different species, and we have the typical shapeshifters and vampires. We have like anything you could possibly think of, any magical, mythical creature you could think of will be in this book, but the way that it's written is very interesting. If I had to choose between Kate Daniels and The Hollows, I would pick The Hollows, because although each book is episodic, we are following a bigger story. And yes, we are following a bigger story in the Kate Daniels series, but it is literally, it's not like, oh, let's go on a next adventure. It's literally like the next day, this new issue happens, and it's very seamless. Although Alona Andrews does a better job at the humor, I feel like Kim Harrison does a better job at character development, and I'm very, very invested and connected to these characters. So, like Kate Daniels, I'm actually buddy reading this with another friend on Discord, and I think the audiobook will be available in March, so I will be picking that up in March. The next genre I have on my list is historical fantasy. I actually only have one title on this list, and that is The Harp King by Juliet Marillier. I absolutely love Juliet Marillier. I discovered her 20 years ago. I think I read The Daughter of the Forest. It was one of the first adult fantasy books I've ever read, and I have a big place in my heart for her writing style. I love the world that she creates. I love the fact that she creates this like cozy, detailed environment that you can really sink your teeth into. This series I don't know much about, and I actually haven't heard many people talking about it, but I do know that it takes place in the same world as her other series, which is basically like a historical Ireland. I don't know when. I'll have to put it here. Some of the characters do cross over, but it's very like minimal, maybe like a name drop or something. The thing I love about Juliet Marillier is she has these worlds that they're very detailed, very realistic, but they have this fantasy element, like this little bit. It's very under the radar, not a huge part of it. So these characters are not like magically amplified and go on these like magical quests. It is there, and there is another otherness to it. Like I said, I don't know much about this one. I do know that it's obviously following Warrior Bards because it is the Warrior Bard series, and I do know that it's multiple POV. Although I own all three books, I'm going to be listening to the audiobook because I believe my favorite narrator, Moira Cork, does the narration for this series. So, very excited to pick this up and get back to Juliet Marillier because honestly, I miss her writing. The next prompt is fantasy, and I'm not sure how I want to break this up first. Which one should I talk about first? Okay, so I think I'm probably going to go with romantic fantasy. I'm not doing romantasy, it's romantic fantasy. Although, what is the difference, honestly? So the first one I want to talk about is not a stranger to my channel, and that is Baked Ink and Blood by Daniel L. Jensen. I have been talking about this book for like since the summertime. I've been meaning to read it since the summertime. I love Daniel L. Jensen's Bridge Kingdom series, like one of my favorites. Amazing duology, and I do believe it is a series of duologies. I didn't love the second duology as much as I love that first one. This is very much a Norse story about a young Viking shield maiden. I've heard mixed things about it, and that's kind of why I've been hesitant to pick it up. But since the sequel is coming out in May, it kind of makes me want to read it more, especially since I don't know, I have a craving for desert settings and Vikings and sci-fi. So if you have a recommendation that fits all those prompts, please let me know down below because, yeah, I don't know, it's weird. That's just what I'm in the mood for. So yeah, this one fits the bill. Also, I picked up The Road of Bones by Demi Winters, and this is also another Viking story. And I believe this is a romantasy, but I think it's more on the there's no fae in it. Because there's no fae in it, I'm kind of more inclined to read it. So yeah, I don't know much about this, but it is a duology, and I'm all about short duologies, especially when it comes to romantic fantasies. So these two are a nice combo to read this spring. And the last romantic fantasy is Wisteria by Adeline Grace. I really want to finish out this trilogy. This is a wonderful gothic YA fantasy that honestly took me by surprise when I first picked up Belladonna. I'm a little burnt out from gothic and European-based fantasies, so I'm kind of holding off on this, but like I said, I really want to complete the series and I do really enjoy it. So I do hope to read it at some point this spring. Now, let's move to fantasy. This is like regular old fantasy with no romance or whatever. So the first one, well, maybe there is romance, but the first one is Legacy of Brightwash by Crystal Mitar. I have wanted to pick up this book for quite a long time. I actually did a video a while ago sampling chapters. This one was one that I read, and out of all the books that I sampled in that video, I actually liked this one the best. But I decided to not continue on with it because of the heavy topic within the books. And at the time, I just wasn't in the right place to visit a book like that. But since then, I think that I am in a stable mental space to handle the topics that are addressed in this book. And the main one is probably violence against children. So that's kind of why I held off from that. I have the pleasure of being able to talk to Crystal on a regular because we are both a part of Taylor's Discord, Taylor from Made Between the Pages. And honestly, the way that she describes things and her sense of humor and just a lot of things I enjoy about just talking to her has made me want to pick this up. Also, it made me want to trust her because she's a very kind person. So I'm like, okay, you can't be that mean in books. And plus, Taylor did talk about how this book was one of her favorite books. And I heard that this has a romance between an older couple, which I'm all for because there is very few books like that around. And honestly, we need more. We need more older couples with like mature romances. So this is kind of like a detective story in like a steampunk or gaslight kind of fantasy world. And we are investigating some crimes against children who have special abilities, I believe. If you're new to my channel, you probably don't know that I don't like to look at synopses of books. I kind of get the idea of people's reviews and kind of like the subgenres or the topics and then just kind of go into it blind. I really do enjoy that kind of experience more. So I'm sorry if I don't give much of a synopsis. But anyways, so the next books I would like to read are a bunch of Joe Abercrombie books. The first one is The Heroes, the second one is Red Country, and the third one is The Devils. The first two are the standalones in between the First Law series, and the second one is his new series. I am slowly making my way through the First Law. I would honestly love to read all of the First Law this spring, but honestly, logistically, time, I don't think is going to happen. But as it stands right now, I want to read these three books this spring, and then maybe in the summertime, I will pick up the Age of Madness series, which I'm so excited to get to. So the First Law, everybody kind of knows what the First Law is about. It's very grim, dark, very character oriented. And The Devils, I literally have no idea what The Devils is about. None. I've heard a lot of mixed things about this book. I've heard that it's a okay book, and then I've heard that it's an amazing book. So I'm very curious to see which side I'll fall into. I will be listening to the audiobook of the First Law books, and if The Devils has the same narrator, I will probably be listening to that through audiobook as well. So the next book I want to talk about is going to be a reread for me. I read this series a couple years ago, and I listened to the audiobook, and I think that that was a mistake. I think that it is one of those books I need to read physically, and that is The Ruin of Kings by Jen Lyons. This is one of those books where it's like either you love it or you hate it. It has a very interesting narrative, but it is very confusing, very convoluted. There's a lot of characters, and each character almost has like 3 names, and it's a really interesting story. I did stop after the third book and I kind of forgot about what happened, but I have been meaning to pick it up because I actually own all of the books in physical copy. And honestly, I think I need to just revisit this with my eyes because the audiobook just really didn't work for me. So I do hope to pick this up at some point this spring and read it, and hopefully I will enjoy it more and continue on with the series. The next 2 books are continuing on with the series, and the first one is Steven Erikson's Dead House Gates. This is the second book in the Malazan series. So I was listening to the audiobook and I got to book 4. I have no card in there for some reason. And the audiobook was removed from Everend. So I just kind of stopped reading it. Since then, I actually purchased it through Audible. And I think that it's been such a long time that I just need to reread the entire book. So I do need to reread it. And I'm really excited. Out of some of these, I'm actually probably the most excited about getting back into this one. And last but not least is The Veiled Throne by Ken Liu. I read the first 2 books last year or the year before. I've been slowly reading them. And honestly, I need to get back into this. I really do enjoy Ken Liu's writing. I think that he's a genius in my mind. He's a genius and he writes fantastic women. My goodness, his women are they are show stealers, showstoppers, whatever the saying is. I need to get back into this. And honestly, I've had a bunch of friends that are just like, are you continuing yet? Please continue. Because, it is a masterpiece. But the reason why I haven't continued is, like I mentioned before with some of the other books, I just wasn't in the right headspace for consuming this type of dense book. And it is huge. It is a huge, chunky boy. I'm going to be listening to the audiobook, and although I'm not the hugest fan of Michael Kramer, it is the only audiobook option I have at the moment. So I will be listening to the audiobook, because if I read this physically, it would take me probably like half a year to read, and I do not have the patience for that. But I am so excited to jump back into this world. So excited. The next 2 books are honorable mentions. They are like, I have my eye on them, I want to read them, but I just haven't had that push to read them. And the first being Demon in White by Christopher Rocchio. I had a really hard time saying that. It took me 3 tries. So this is the 3rd book in the Sun Eater series, and I think I have a very unpopular opinion and I'm feeling very mid about this series. I think that it has so many things that I really enjoy, like the Sci-Fantasy, very much Star Wars inspired, the following of a villain, but it also has a lot of things that I don't like the person telling their story, and some of the writing style, and also some of the plot I just really don't connect with. There is another reason that I decided to kind of take a pause on it, and I'm not going to get into that because it's very personal, but I was talking to a friend and they assured me that it's not a huge thing, and if I could just kind of close my ears to it or just push past it, it'll be okay. Although I do want to read it, it is not a priority. Honestly, some of those books that I mentioned on my list, I really want to read much more than I do want to read this, but I feel like I still need to give it a chance. My last honorable mention is The Black-Tongued Thief by Christopher Buehlman. I've had this book on my list, on my shelves, for years now. And honestly, the only reason why I haven't really picked it up is, well, one, I was waiting for it to continue on, and I think it is only a standalone, so I wasn't sure what happened. And then there's a prequel that came out that's really getting a lot of hype right now. That's kind of the reason why I didn't start it, because I was waiting for that sequel, only to find out there isn't going to be a sequel. Is there going to be? I don't even know. I did start it. I sampled the first chapter, and it's got a very D&D feel to it. I don't like Dungeons and Dragons. It's not the type of story that I'm interested in, but I've heard that the humor and the found family and the characters are just immaculate. And as a person who loves a lot of humor, well done humor, in my books, I feel like I really just needed to pick it up and read it. And honestly, it's a really short book, so I just need to do it. I just, like I mentioned before, there's so many other books that I really, really want to read more. So we'll see. But you know what? Watch me pick it up, and it is one of my favorite books of all time. So those are all the books that I really hope to get to this spring. Fingers crossed that I will at least get to some of them. I mean, there's a lot of awesome books on this list, so I really want to read all of them, to be honest. If you've made it all the way to the end of the video, but you don't really have anything to say, but you still want to leave a comment, leave a flower emoji for Dandelion Dynasty. As always, if you like this video, please think about liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. And thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day. Bye.